So now it says that it's preparing to live stream, and also that we are being live streamed, and also maybe I think we're live, but I don't see it
Hello.
yet. So maybe. Now
I
I'm
think we're
sure.
there. We're there. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Folk
Hello,
Music.
hello.
Hi. Welcome
Happy
to the Folk.
Friday.
Happy Friday to you. Welcome to the Folk Music Educator podcast. My name is Phil Kramer,
And I'm Erin May Lewis.
and we are two folk music educators teaching in the old time dulcimer, old time banjo, fiddle, Irish, all the things. We are we are people with too many hats, probably.
Right. We
Figure,
teach folk music all mostly online.
oh, mostly online. So yeah, exactly. How's your week going, Sarah?
It's been a great week, actually.
It's
It's
been
just
a
been a
great
really
week.
good week. Yeah.
It's been a good week for me too. I am super distractible today. You'll have to forgive me. It's been a thing. It's been a thing. But yeah, we always try to chat on Tuesdays about ideas, and then of course we got like I think we just ended up having a coffee day on
We
Tuesday.
did. It was
It's,
like a deeply philosophical, like how is life really life? Far
exactly.
away from the side of music, and that's
And
beautiful
so when we
too.
logged on today, Aaron's like, we could do that again, or we could try something more concrete. So, what is your concrete idea you want to chat
Yeah,
about?
well, my idea is to have a conversation about approaches to lesson planning, and
Yes.
lesson planning for different contexts. And we like to talk about how, like, we're more on the creative neuro spicy side than the really super neurotypical linear thinking side. And
Uh huh.
so, and also as folk music educators, there's just a lot less sort of pre-existing pedagogical use
Resources.
this book as a guide, um, method books and methodologies. I think probably like Suzuki violin comes the closest to being a methodical approach to folk music, but it's really then filters you into classical. And so it
Yeah.
starts with this kind of, and Kodai, I think, kind of does a similar thing in its kind of methodical approach of using folk music to eventually make classical musicians out of people.
100%. Yeah. And
So,
there's
yeah,
certain.
so I don't know. I'm curious. I'm curious
No,
what it looks
yeah,
like
you're
for you.
exactly right, because there's a little less gravitas in pulling out a clawhammer banjo book for dummies than there is pulling out
Yes,
like
exactly. You
yeah
can teach yourself that
yeah
series, that Mel Bay series. You can teach yourself.
and so there is a little bit of as teachers we kind of have to develop our own lexicon and our own language on how to approach these and think sometimes we're really lucky and we grow up in a tradition or an environment where we have really supportive teachers that we're like, ooh, I get to emulate this person. And then sometimes not so much. And we're kind of faking it till we make it. And so, yeah.
Yeah, and there's like I was thinking this morning, so I'm friends with a woman who has, I think, a master's in flute pedagogy and also
Ooh.
teaches piano lessons. And I remember talking to her one time, and she said basically what she does every Sunday is she looks through each of the method books she's using with her students and just checks to see what's on the next page. And that was kind of how she does lesson planning. And I was like, what? That's a million miles away from what lesson planning looks like
Uh
for
huh.
me, partially because I don't just tell my students, well, in order to take lessons with me, you have to buy this book.
Yeah.
Um, and and I have recently had a few students who were working with another teacher who was downsizing their studio. And so she wasn't gonna keep teaching as much. And some of them came to me and they were describing just like the kinds of lesson experience they were having with this other mountain dulcimer teacher. So we're like still talking about the same instrument and the same kind of
Yeah.
genre. And that teacher also had a strategy of saying, like, this is the book we're going to go through, and we're going to go through each page of the book, and you will start the next page once you can play this page without making mistakes. And it was just again so far from how I approach the music education process that I was like, "Oh, well, yeah, I mean, I guess we can do that if you want that." But there are some students who they just are like, "Well, tell me what to practice, and I will practice that, and then next week tell me something else to practice." And I'm like, "I don't know, practice whatever you want. Like, play music that's
Yeah.
interesting and inspiring to you, and when you have problems because you realize you don't know how to do it, then that's where I'm going to come in and help you." But it is much more of a like, you can teach yourself approach.
Yeah.
And I think it's because I was self taught. And my approach is when I get a lesson, I want it to not just tell me what the next page in the book is, because I can probably figure most of them out by myself. But then there are these moments when I get really stuck and I have no idea what's going on. Like, and I want the tricks and tips and the
Yeah.
shortcuts and the, you know?
Totally. For me, I think one of the as someone who like we both went to college for different for music and all those kind of things, but I think
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
of our education might have been unique. Um, the way that I kind of see a lot of traditional um, music pedagogy as we kind of see it today is that they're we're teaching in service of an institutional support. Like
Hmm.
um we start learning things like Suzuki and stuff like that because we've agreed like usually you have a studio, a music teacher has a studio of kids and anywhere between, you know, 5 students to 50 students, and you might have multiple teachers all working in these same things. And so the idea of having a recital that could have 40 different options of things that they're going to be playing and different expectations and all those things, it falls apart. You need to have some sort of semblance of normality. And so, hey, we're going to create this streamlined approach,
Hmm.
kind of on a business standpoint. That doesn't mean that Suzuki doesn't have really clear and awesome pedagogical ideas, but they're really
Yeah.
trying to ensure that kids can experience the same experience and and almost create the same product as they're done. They're helping support the studio and this institution of that.
Yeah, and you know, there is something magical which I got to witness at the Bluegrass Festival a couple weekends ago, where if three different fiddle players have all come through the same Suzuki thing, but they're at different phases,
Yeah.
there is this being able to bring them in the same room and they've never met before, and the littlest one starts playing the first five songs in the Suzuki method, and the older ones start doing it with them and then also add a little something to it because they've learned just a little bit more, and it
Mm.
creates this kind of beautiful moment of connection where all the little fiddle players in the room all know how to play the same song in mostly the same way, and there is something special about that that I don't want to discount.
And no, and I think that and there's a very specific kind of joy and community and things that can be created
Yeah.
with that. Um, and I think what ends up going on is that it just kind of ends up, for better for worse, it creates kind of a type of creativity and it's a, that you go off to conservatory and you're learning the same, you're preparing a very similar thing and all that kind of stuff. And so what ends up um, happening is that you kind of create, you're learning how to create music that is supported within that sphere, and that's
Yeah.
great. But
Yeah.
and so there's a lot of resources available to you to kind of protect that sphere of that institution, whether it's
Hmm.
like violin performance at a college or music education or so on and so forth. Um, we are a little bit different in the sense that there is like a bluegrass, like there is IBMA and there's some things like
Hmm.
that, but really like the idea of whether it's financial or academic institution that we're kind of upholding isn't really there, so you don't really need that rubric in the same way.
Hmm.
The way that I've ended up tackling it, I had to one class that I did take. I think I might have brought this up before. Is I There was a class that I had to take called Literacy in the Content Areas, and it was taught by this uh, little old Russian lady who I swear to God was either a Time Lord or Miss Frizzle or both.
Oh.
She was adorable. And I was really annoyed to take this class because I thought, once again, it's going to be me being expected as a future music teacher that I'm going to have to teach math, science, English, or something in my
Oh, right.
classroom rather than
Uh-huh.
music. But in reality, what they were talking about is like, no, each one of your content areas has this rich vocabulary and lexicon that is attached to yours, and you're trying to not necessarily make them write how to be a part, like write within this sphere, but to think cohesively about what you're talking about in that space. Like you want a student to go, oh yeah, we're going to be playing an AABB tune that's in the key of D. It's just 1 4 5. There is a 5 of 5 in in these things, and if you have basic music theory knowledge, that probably, well, not basic, but like you have a little bit more experience, you can understand where I'm going. There's a roadmap in your brain. For a brand new music student, blah 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 blah.
Uh-huh.
And so for me, what has been very interesting for me is, as a teacher, my lesson plans end up being a lot of determining what pa- where are they in their vocabulary list of
Hmm.
what kind of culture or subculture or thing do they want music to participate in how to best cre- create something that makes them more literate in the things that they want to do, while also simultaneously kind of fostering a technique that will help them grow, like either a mechanical technique, a conceptual, or something like that. And
Hmm.
so unfortunately a lot of um not a I don't know if unfortunately, but there's a lot of my lesson time that is dedicated to, okay, what are you thinking about this? Tell me about your experience with this thing. What is your, so we can kind of build upon that knowledge. I I make the joke that, oh, I am someone's interactive banjo podcast once a week, or interactive fiddle podcast once a week.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
So did that help?
Yeah. So another question that I have is your process for lesson planning something that happens in advance of the lessons, or is it a bit more like you have a library of resources that you have, and then you kind of pull them out in the moment with your students depending on those kind of answers to the questions that you're getting?
A little bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that, like, if a student brings something to me, we focus on that, and I tell them
Yeah.
more of my workflow on how I would approach learning this. And so it's kind of like that medical idea of show one, see one, show one, learn one, teach one. Essentially, like see it, um, do it, teach it to someone else. And so I'm really trying
Mm-hmm.
to kind of
Mm-hmm.
help students do that. I don't know if that's the best example, but anyway. But that being said, I do have a list of tunes that in my head that people can learn, but the ways that I've arranged those tunes are, they are almost more of like, oh, showing them is like, hey, here's uh, this fun dish that I've made for you. Look at this nice macaroni and cheese. And they don't know that I have pureed sweet potato in it to make the vegetable count higher. I have a lot
Uh-huh.
of techniques that are hidden in it, or like, oh, here's that thing. And once we've
Right.
accomplished it, we go back and kind of like, oh, here's all the cool things that you were doing here and you weren't realizing it. And
Hmm.
so a little bit of
Hmm.
both. I follow workflow. I have established workflows to problems more than I have set lesson plans.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me more about what that looks like. Um, like, do you have your music like organized on your computer in folders that are like this technique, this technique, this technique, or like is it written down somewhere where you have like here's a problem, here's my list, or is it all in your head?
A little bit in my head. I do have a folder called Teaching Materials that
Yeah.
has a lot of stuff, but a lot of the time it's more of bespoke. Like, I will be working with a student on how to play Sugar Hill. And in the moment, as I'm learning it, I can see, oh, okay, we're having some issues with that ring finger reach there here. So, what can we do to adapt this to make this better for their body type and all that stuff? And then we've learned a version of the tune that they can go and play with others and do all that stuff. But then at the end of the lesson, I go and make a version of the tab of Sugar Hill that is their version. So Addie Sugar Hill. And so in my teaching
Hmm.
materials, I don't have a Sugar Hill. I have probably 20. And the same with Old Joe Clark and Cripple Creek, and show them how my brain is working, how I'm making all that stuff. And
Yeah.
so it's really nice to be able to visually see it and all that stuff. I haven't gotten any complaints yet, but
Yeah, well, so I there are three different categories of lesson planning for me
yeah,
because I have private students.
yeah,
I have, and that could probably be divided in adults and kids because I
yeah,
have private kids and private adults, and that is kind of different. Um, Although it's fun to see how some of my kids are like getting into their own creative personalities a lot too.
yeah,
But with kids, there's a lot more of like the teacher just needs to feed them the next thing because they don't have a lifetime experience of music that they like and things they're hoping to be able to do. And self reflection to know that they liked this kind of thing better than that kind of thing. Like there's a lot
yeah,
more that I have to just spoon feed, which is how it's supposed to be. So, but then I have like the 6 week classes that I do where
yeah,
I am teaching a group of students, the same group for 6 weeks, and there's some sort of a like focus of our attention. So sometimes it's on specifically strumming techniques, or sometimes it's on learning a particular style of playing, and sometimes it's like we're just gonna study Scottish tunes for 6 weeks and see what we uncover. And so there's like a focus thing, but I provide the materials for the class, but I don't build out my lesson plans for all 6 weeks at once.
yeah,
I build them out for the first week for sort of how I expect the class will begin to go. And then I meet the students and I hear what they're working on and I make sure there's time for like, this is working, this is not, here's where I'm stuck, that was too hard, that was too easy, those kinds
stuff.
of
Yeah,
things before I build out the next kind of series. And sometimes I'll lay out an outline of what I think each week's focus is going to be, but then I still pick specific tunes or I write out exercises or whatever differently depending on the feedback I'm getting in those classes. And then the like third way I lesson plan is for these like one time 1 hour teaching events where it's
yeah,
like I see this group of students, it's a group, I see them once for 1 hour, there's a title, a topic, a thing we're trying to tackle, and those materials have to be sent usually like a week in advance to make sure everybody has time to get them and print them and download them and
Yeah.
whatever. And so I have to be really precise in my lesson planning for that kind of thing. And it's like I have 1 hour and only 1 hour, and there's another class starting in an hour, so I can't let it go long. It's like there's a very specific thing that I'm lesson planning for, and my process is different for all of those.
And I think that that's really cool, and I'm kind of envious listening to how you're talking about it, because like I think one of the I'm proud of my teaching style and how it works with my students, but I
Yeah.
do think one of the biggest limitations to it is that when I go to either teach with a class setting, like lesson plan for a class setting, or for a going into a book like kind of format,
Hmm.
there is either, to me it feels like a blank mirror both times that I'm looking at. All I'm seeing is
Hmm.
myself, and I have no um way of reacting and adjusting to this fake thing. And um it's not, I think you'd probably have a little bit better, a better skill set actually lesson planning in that way than I do, because I am much more, I have my workflows and I work off the cuff and good problem solving skills, but not
Yeah.
necessarily, I I react in the moment. I can't like proactively react. Like I can't anticipate,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
after, not especially not for a while. Like there are some students that I can go, oh, I know exactly what is going to be a problem area for them, but even before we get to it.
Yeah, there's definitely like there are some things that like at this point I've taught it enough times that I'm usually really good at predicting where the whole class is gonna fall apart. Like, you know.
Yeah.
But so a couple things that really have, I think, helped guide me. One is a college guitar pedagogy course I took from a jazz guitar instructor, and it
Love it.
was incredible. And the one of the things that stuck with me the most is she talked a lot about the different learning styles. So
Okay.
when we work one on one with a student, we can often figure out what our student's learning style is, and we just teach to that
Yeah.
because you figure out pretty quickly, like me describing how to do a thing is not helping this student at all. They just need to try doing it. So I'll be like, here, try this. And then that student will respond really well. Or like, you can tell, here, try this. And they stare at you deer in the headlights that like they're a person who needs a lot more depth of understanding before they try a thing. And so there's, you do that almost intuitively in a one-on-one setting, but when
Yeah.
you're in a group setting you tend to teach to your learning style.
Yeah.
And what she helped me see is that every single lesson needs to have something right away for kinesthetic learners to just start doing. And then it needs a pause for the people who need that like understanding and need verbal descriptions of things or linguistic description. They need words to understand the thing,
Yeah.
to grasp it. You'll also have visual learners who need pictures. And so you need to have lots of charts and graphs and things written on the page because some people will not understand it until they see the diagram of the thing. And you need to have something for the really oral learners. So it's important to play the thing you want them to learn.
Yeah.
And by having that, and then there are social learners and there are more like introvert learners. That wasn't the language for it, but there are kind of two different kinds of learners. And so your social learners are gonna thrive in that sitting knee to knee with a whole group of people. And your more private learners are gonna feel really kind of embarrassed about being there. And so not drawing attention to the person who's just sitting in the back and taking it all in and listening is important because they're also learning and they're learning in the way that they learn. And if you're like, why aren't you doing it? Then they're just gonna shut down and walk out. Um,
Yeah.
so it has helped me. And now when I'm lesson planning, I basically pick a topic, and usually it's either a technique, which I'll choose a tune to support, or it's a tune, which I will choose some techniques to teach through. So I present it, like in the description. Some people are going to be drawn to, let's learn this tune, and then surprise, I'm teaching you a technique. And some people are going to be drawn to, let's learn a technique, and then of course, you're going to learn a tune because how else are you going to know what to do with that technique?
Yeah.
But then I will put together basically oral learners need to hear it, visual learners need to see it, kinesthetic learners need to do it, and processors need to understand it. And so I make sure that I'm kind of going through hear it, see it, say it, do it, hear it, see it, say it, do it, hear it, see it, say it, do it, kind of over and over. And I kind of break down my processes into what I think of as two or sometimes three, depending on how ambitious I'm feeling, like 20-minute segments.
Yeah.
So it's like, here's a technique and a bit of a tune. We're going to work on it for 20 minutes. Like if we're focusing on the tune, we're going to work on the A part for 20 minutes. And
Yeah.
then we're going to talk about all the places that it was sticky and we got kind of stuck. And then we're going to work on the B part for 20 minutes. And then we're going to have this time to kind of wrap it all up with a neat little tidy bow at the end. But
I like
having
that.
that, I mean, it's kind of like an outline, which I have like an outline of how I make a set list, and then I plug in the pieces into it. So I
Yeah.
kind of have a mental outline of what needs to be included in a good lesson plan, and then I kind of plug in the pieces.
I like that a lot.
Which, I mean, that sounds a lot like your like workflow idea. Just you kind of have this idea of here's how you problem solve, and then you've got all these pieces that you can plug into that.
Yeah. And I it reminds me of a Spanish teacher that I had in junior high who did a very similar kind of system. There was a lot of she was adorable. She had commissioned um, she had lesson plans that she hadn't changed in forever, but she had these songs commissioned written so
Oh.
you could sing along with them and all the things in the class, all the verb tenses and stuff. She had flashcards that you would touch and you move around and all that stuff.
Hmm.
And while I do not speak Spanish and I don't necessarily remember the content as well as I once did, it was by far one of the more interesting, like, I retained way more information, like processes and activities in that class compared to any other class of that time. I have way more memories of that class than any other.
Hmm. Hmm.
I like that a lot. And I think, yeah, it kind of predicts the system. Um, I see a lot of my lessons as like if then statements. If a student
Hmm.
has this issue, then we follow this path kind of idea.
Yeah.
And
And even in the 6 week classes that I teach, I start with like, what did you think you were signing up for? What's your goal for
yeah,
the next 6 weeks? What are you hoping to do as a result of this? And sometimes I have students who are just like, I just want to keep getting better. And I know that if I'm in a consistent learning environment, I will keep getting better. So I don't have a specific goal about what I'll get better at. I just want to keep getting better. But I have some students who are like, I want to have 3 songs memorized by the end, or I want to be able to go to this jam and not feel completely lost, or I want to be able to. And I love starting with whether it's in a private lesson or a group kind of setting by saying like, what do you hope to be able to do? If there was this thing that's like when I achieve this, then I am successful. What is
Yeah.
that? And so, it's surprising to me how many people are like, if I could just play Amazing Grace, I would feel so good about myself. And I'm like, all right, man, then like what we're gonna practice for the next 6 weeks is helping you play Amazing Grace to the point that you feel really good about it. And then you're gonna feel really good about your playing, and you're gonna discover you can do a lot more too. But why would we start with anything else if that's the thing that makes you feel like you are successful at this?
No, that's I. You're exactly right. Like I remember I was chatting with my dad, who is also a music teacher and is getting a lot of interactions with other private music teachers when he goes down to um, Vegas to take my niece to her private saxophone lesson. And he was talking to one of the teachers there, this person goes, I have a student who has, I had this lady sign up for lessons who is not really interested in learning um, how to read music. They were just wanting to learn how to play some songs at first, and they didn't want to go through the process of like the method class, all these things. She just wanted to learn how to play a handful of songs by ear. So she brought me sheet music to play, and he goes, no, I won't do that. I can teach you to learn how to read the music and then read off of that first, but I'm not just going to teach you how to play this song without it. And my dad's like, well, you're a jazz player. Can't you do that? And he goes, yeah, it's more of the principle of the thing, though.
Man.
Yeah, and it's definitely a man kind of situation because I do think, to me, beyond any sort of um, methodologies or anything like that, I want students to interact with music in the way that best suits them.
Yeah.
And my goal is to establish momentum um, and get that going. Okay, there's a great. I've been trying to whittle around this idea of how my lesson plan goes because it's such a dorky way of doing it, but I think it's time. um, there's a for anyone who's a super nerd or has a child who owns a Nintendo Switch, you may have heard of a game called Zelda Breath of the Wild. And
Okay.
okay, hold on, everyone. Basically, when you start the game, you're on top of this isolated part of the map, and you have very clear and decisive goals on what you need to do. You're going to go to all these little shrines to solve puzzles and collect abilities, and then once it is done, you get a little paraglider that unlocks your ability to go to the rest of the map. And when you unlock it, all of a sudden you see that it's massive. I mean, massive, massive. It's like it takes all day to walk around this thing. Not in game, but in real life. It would take all day. And there's only one goal of defeat Ganon. And then the game is open and people can approach it in any way that they want. And what's really funny is like while listening to people describe the game designers describe this is we wanted to put students players into situations where they will do something accidentally and then we'll show them how to do it. So you're not being
Uh-huh.
inundated with this is how you do this thing, this is how you do this, or
Press
all
this button.
these
Now do
press
this.
this, yeah, or contrived little systems. It allows people who are like, I am just going to go into every situation whole, like, head first versus I'm going to be sneaky about it. Or I'm going to go straight to the end of the game and try to defeat the big baddie right now versus people are like, oh, I've played 800 hours of this game just collecting like little things and being cozy and having fun and sightseeing. And to me, I think especially learning music without the guide of a institution or a thing that you're trying to support, there's a
Hmm.
little bit of that at the end of the day, we're all roads are leading to defeat Ganon or to learn just how to play this instrument. But to me, I want to more be the facilitator of little their intuition, their into like where they're going. And once they've done something cool, I go, "Hey, you've done something cool. Let's talk about that and describe that situation." So I hate to admit it, so much of my lesson planning almost I don't want to say feels manipulative, but kind of feels like, oh, like slightly nudging students into interesting directions and letting them find things. And sometimes they come out of left field and go, "Can we learn how to play country swing like finger style guitar playing?" And now I have to spend a couple of hours learning how to play that on YouTube.
Right,
And
right.
but I don't know. It's been one of my biggest hurdles to jumping into teaching online or writing in a book because like how, how do I do this up front and not just kind of support? How do I not be a facilitator for a someone's journey versus actually being like the guide?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly why I have not managed to like have a pre-recorded course or write more than one book, which is a entirely a reference book. Like I created a library, a catalog of all of the chords you can play on Chromatic Mountain Dulcimer. I didn't create like here's music you can play on the Chromatic Mountain Dulcimer because I get it's really hard for me to find that place of like how do we maintain that kind of fluidity of helping students meet the goals they have inside of a book that I wrote or a lesson that
Yeah.
I pre recorded. And I am starting to feel like I have a sense of like, okay, I could pre record a lesson about my technique for strumming or flat picking or like counting these different kinds of rhythms or how do I move fluidly up and down the fretboard. But I start thinking about that kind of stuff and I think, well, that doesn't feel like the thing that's important. You know, the thing that's important is that taking the process and applying it and using it to meet your own goals. And how do I create that in a pre-existing, pre-recorded, standalone thing? And I do always then come back around to like I don't know. I don't know how to create this like really concrete thing that exists as a structure
Yeah.
and make it meet the goals of folk music education, which has this greater kind of fluidity and improvisation and creativity built into it.
And that's I think we're hitting right up against the head of why there is not as many why there is reference material for what we do while it's really hard to do this because um for me the best example that I've ended up describing is like recipe books. Like to me, I almost feel better like going, "Oh no, I'm showing you a basic recipe for how to make biscuits and gravy." But in by no way does this mean that everyone everywhere is going to do this the same way. My mom still makes the best,
Mm-hmm.
but you get it's a
I've
starting point.
the old Betty Crocker cookbooks, they have this great, like, here's sort of the basics of like how to make pastry dough or something. Like,
Yeah.
these are the basics of the supplies you'll need. Like, what does it mean to have a pastry cutter? What does it mean to roll something out? Those kinds of like definition things. And then I love it because every page has a key recipe, which is like, this is basically how you make the thing. It's so funny. My computer. So like here's your key recipe, and then it has like 47 variations. That's an
Yeah.
exaggeration, but there's like 8 variations on every page. So like
Yeah.
here's your key recipe for pie crust, and then here's 8 different kinds of pies that you could make. Or here's your key recipe for
Yeah.
scones, but here's 8 different flavors of scones that might be really fun. And it gives you that kind of theme and variation on a single page. And the Betty Crocker cookbook is by the old one, the old Betty Crocker cookbook is by far my favorite cookbook because it's like, here's the basic ingredients you need, and then here's all the kind of variations you can do with it.
I love that, and I think that's I think that's a great way to do it. Like one of the ideas that I had for marketing that I thought would be fun is I have this idea for what I call there's a lot of practicing that I do for students that I call pocket practice because so many of my students are work from homers, so they
Hmm.
have 10-15 minutes in between a thing, and that's when they want to practice and they go, I guess I'll just play through Red Haired Boy a couple of times. But like I create these like little standalone loopable things that usually work a on a technique on like a chord progression thing, a right hand strumming pattern thing, bowing, whatnot. And I try to go, these are satisfying. These are snacks. These are things that you can do that just light up your brain, but so happen to have some nutritional value when it comes to your skill sets.
Yeah.
And my like I've always thought it would be great to have like sell them as a little actual recipe box that you can keep on your desk and open it up and pull out just a random thing. Go, okay, I am going to do this strumming pattern now for 10-15 minutes to explore that. Very cool. Put that back in. 2 days later, grab this. Oh, this is a thing about movable chord progressions 1 6 4 5 1. I'm going to practice this in all these keys that it has, and on the back it'll show you what the actual keys were and all that. And I think that would be super fun. But
I I think that's a great idea.
yeah,
I love the term pocket practice too. Yeah.
just like a thing that you can just pull out of your pocket things. And
Uh-huh.
yeah, yeah.
All right.
Don't steal
I
it,
like
internet.
it. I'm
This
not
is
gonna
my
steal it.
idea.
I think you
No,
should
you can.
develop it.
You can steal. Internet, don't steal, or
Internet,
at
don't
least
steal this idea.
internet, don't steal.
The moment when you're like, "Ooh, are people actually listening to this conversation?"
Yeah, exactly. But to me, that's I don't know. That's what I like doing, and I like finding um I think detailed notes, thinking all if I had to be thoughtful is the best thing that I can kind of describe with all these things. And I think we are a reflection of the way we teach folk music ends up being a reflection of how we ourselves learned and think and are also
Yeah.
our place within the culture of the community. Because I think I would teach very differently. I would teach old time fiddle very differently compared to someone like Sophie Wellington, who seems to be like actively traveling and being a part of all these little old time spaces and doing all these things. Their experience with the music is different than mine.
Mhm.
Me being kind of on the fringes in the internet, like I teach for the chronically online old time musician. And
Which is great because there is a group of people for whom that is the space that they can connect with community in. I
yeah,
love that we can bring resources to that.
so yeah. But thank you for asking such a fun question. I hope I was helpful.
I love collecting all these little ideas because I feel like as a teacher, I'm always constantly adding new ideas to everything I'm doing. I'm like, yes, give me more tools for being a more effective communicator and for presenting different approaches because I can only know my own brain's way of processing things unless I ask other people how they process things. And I love my little brain, and I certainly hope not everyone has a brain like mine because sometimes it's really difficult to manage my little brain. And so like I don't want all of my students to have to learn like me. I want there to be easier, different, better paths for them too, you know? So,
I love that. Well, I love the way you think. It's great. And I'm really glad we have these spaces. I hope, folks, if you have ideas on this, please feel free to reach out to us. I'm on Instagram and TikTok at Fiddle and Phil and on my website at fiddleandphilkramer.com. And where can we find you, Miss Erin?
And I'm at Erin May Music in all the places.
In all the places. We do
Yeah.
technically still have Folk Music Educator Podcast on Instagram. You can go follow us there. And we promise to start updating that sometime.
Yeah, well, we're making podcasts regularly, so maybe the next thing will be to make social media content
Yeah,
regularly too.
exactly. But
Baby steps.
baby steps. Thank you so much, friends. And
Thanks,
thank you.
friends. Remember, always a teacher and
Always a
always a
student.
student. See y'all.
Bye.